friends. We are here in Acts chapter 26. So this is where Paul is basically giving his testimony in front of Agrippa. This is Herod Agrippa II. And I say testimony, usually when people say, I'm giving my testimony in church today, usually it's a testimony of how they became a Christian. This is kind of different because he's actually on trial. Like, this is more of a trial testimony, but it really amounts to about the same thing. And because he's talking about why he's on trial, and basically he's on trial for spreading Christianity. So basically what happens is, in the beginning, Agrippa says, you're allowed to speak freely, say anything you want. And so he does. And in the beginning, he says, I'm really, he doesn't use these words, but, he's really happy to talk to Agrippa about this. And that may sound like flattery. I feel like when he said that to the governor in the previous chapter, it's just a formality. And this may be a formality also, but I actually think that it wasn't flattery or a formality. I think that he really was excited to talk about these things to Agrippa. Not because he particularly liked him, but he says so. He says the reasons that he's excited about it. And comes down to this, here is this man who is familiar with all the customs of Judaism. Now, he's essentially the king of the Jewish people, but he himself is not a Jew. But he's very familiar, being the king of these people, what their customs are, what their culture is, and what their religion is. And so, Judaism, more than other ethnic groups or any type of people group, it's wrapped up in their religion more than anything else. So he's like, you, Agrippa, you know about these things. And so then he starts to tell why he's imprisoned. And he says basically I should go back. First he says that he's a Pharisee. And he says that is the strictest form of Judaism. He's saying I grew up in a very strict upbringing where I was upholding every part of Judaism. And he's still in that, he's still essentially upholding all of these things. He's saying I never strayed from that. But part of that, and this is a very interesting part of his saying, of what he was saying, is that part of what makes someone a Pharisee is the belief in the resurrection of the dead. Within, the Old Testament and the way that the Pharisees interpreted the Old Testament, it seemed to them that there was some sort of life after death. And not just heaven, a bodily resurrection. And so that is what the Pharisees believed. And he is saying, I'm basically on trial for believing this not as a theory, but as a reality. Not only do I believe that in the resurrection of the dead, I believe that there has been a resurrection of the dead. And he starts saying, and it's this way, and then he goes through basically, his testimony in the way that we really, mean it today, and that's that he was walking to Damascus and he was blinded, and it was God who spoke to him and said, I'm Jesus who you're persecuting. And so he said after that, that before that, I was persecuting the Christians. This way that you were talking about, I was trying to get these people to blaspheme so that I could have them killed. And I was going out of my way to get rid of what we now call Christianity. And he said, but then I was blinded, and then it was God saying, I'm Jesus who you're persecuting. And from then I went back and I preached to the Jews, but ultimately I ended up going to the Gentiles. And it said, it's for this that I am on trial. Now, I believe that when he says for this, he's saying more than one thing, but he left off saying that he went to the Gentiles. And I believe that's true. I think for whatever reason, the Jewish leaders could not stand that here is a guy that is preaching that their beliefs, the hope that they have been hoping in, is not just for them, but it's for everyone. So that's what he says. I'm on trial for this. And then he starts speaking about Jesus and how he's resurrected from the dead. And the governor that's there with him, it's Agrippa is sitting there with the governor that is over him. And he said, Paul, you're out of your mind. It says, Paul, you're beside yourself. And he said, your education has made you go crazy, essentially, is what he's saying. He's saying, this Jesus, he did not raise from the dead. And then Paul looks over to Agrippa. This must have been some scene. Paul looks over at Agrippa and he's like, Agrippa knows what I'm talking about. He was there when it all happened. It's not so crazy, is it? And then Paul looks over at Agrippa and says, do you believe what the prophecies were saying? Essentially he's saying, don't you believe that this happened? Not only did it happen, but that it was prophesied to happen. And Agrippa says, are you trying to make me a Christian in such a small time? And Paul says, I don't know about how much time, but it is my will, it is my hope that everybody would be as I am, except for the chains that I'm in. He's saying, I want everybody to have the hope that I have. He's saying, I want everybody to experience the Holy Spirit. I want everybody to have the joy that comes from knowing the one and true God. I want everything that I have, I want everybody else to have, except for these chains. And so that was pretty much the end of it. It ended with Agrippa saying this thing, and I think this is so interesting. He said, if it wasn't for the fact that you already appealed to go to Rome, I would have set you free. Now, I don't know what's happening to the heart of Agrippa here. It's, maybe if I looked in history, you'd find that, the Agrippas didn't have, or the Herods, the Herod family didn't have a great track record for being good people. But something could have been happening in the heart of Agrippa right now. And, it's possible. But at any case, his heart was softened toward Paul. And it sounds like Paul had somewhat of an impact on him for his words. And it sounded like he really believed that Paul had his best interest in mind. Anyway, that's how the chapter ends. But it's just an interesting idea that had Paul not appealed, he wouldn't have gone to Rome. And part of you thinks, well, he ended up dying in Rome. Maybe that would have been a good thing. Poor Paul appealed to Rome. But the goal is not to not die. The goal is to spread the word, to live a life that is going to have an eternal impact. So it was God's will for Paul to go to Rome, and he has great success, in his life. I don't think you can complain about the results of Paul. But that is Acts chapter 26. All right, bye.